Right. Hello, everyone. We have a couple more people entering from the waiting room. All right. It looks like most folks are on, so we can get started. Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Friday afternoon. We are very excited to have Leslie and Leslie here today to talk with us about a topic that I think is increasingly relevant for a lot of our teams, which is how members across the team can be supporting young people and their families as they're having issues with school, navigating what supports are available to them. So I will do a brief introduction. So the Federation for Children with Special Needs is the organization that Leslie's joining us from. It is a nationally recognized nonprofit organization that works with families and young people to navigate special education processes and also state systems and to connect with community organizations. And the majority of the staff at FCSN are family members or identify as individuals with disabilities. So it really comes from a place of lived experience. So Leslie joined the Federation in 2011. She serves as the project director for the MassPAC project, providing technical assistance to special education parent advisory councils and to district special education administrators. So Leslie is the mother of two young adult sons, both of whom attended public school on an IEP. She holds a bachelor's degree in international relations and political science from Tufts University, as well as a JD from Suffolk University Law School. We also on here have Rebecca Davis, who unfortunately got sick this morning and is not able to attend. So thank you, Leslie, for taking this on for us. Appreciate you joining us.
No, happy to be here. And I love hearing how I have a degree in international relations and political science, something I use every day. I think learning is all good, so I'm happy to be here. Um, I hope you understand that the Federation is a great free resource for everyone, whether families, students, schools, professionals in the field. We are the federally funded Parent Training and Information Center with that free phone call. So really reach out and ask questions because I think that's how we all learn. And so let me get started here. Hoping it all works. Click. So I talked about this like adjusting your sail. And so I come to this work as a parent of a son who I have two sons. My older son is a young man with dyslexia, and my younger son had a mental illness, depression, anxiety diagnosis. And they're two different journeys. And we had to kind of adjust our kind of pathway along the way. It wasn't easy for me, and that's kind of why I do this work. And I had a higher level of, understanding. I speak English. I was, college graduate. I had a law degree, and it was still very, very difficult. And so I think what I hope to share with you is that as you work with students and families, that, there is a path, but it might shift and change. And I just think it's just kind of always looking towards that goal on the far end where you're sailing to, and try to navigate there. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about, how schools work with both students and families, because school doesn't always work for all kids, and there are bumps along the way. And most of what we do at the Federation is help families and understand their rights and responsibilities under the law, mostly in the special education field, but the Federation also helps if you're navigating the healthcare system, because we have students with special healthcare needs. And it's not easy in the healthcare field either. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this whole special education process and the rights and responsibilities of under the law. I have the chat open, so feel free to throw questions into the chat. I also don't mind if you interrupt, and I think that's going to be the most interesting thing today is if you guys kind of give me your perspective, because I'm not an expert in, psychiatric diagnosis and understanding. I've done a little bit of research into psychosis and how that fits into special education. And I think it's kind of unique in terms of how students can be supported. So feel free to throw things into the chat or just, unmute and ask a question along the way. I'm just going to throw my email into the chat so you have that. I have to navigate. So school districts have lots of different systems to support students. Students are in general education primarily, and their support's built into that system. And so Massachusetts uses the multi-tiered system of support, or MTSS. And so that way, if you look at it, everyone gets tier one, that universal support. Some students, though, might be identified that, they're struggling in one area or another, so that there might be some targeted support. And then there's always a small group of students that might get a little bit more intensive support. And this is all happening within the general education classroom. So it might be a small pull-out group. It might be an aide or someone's in the classroom, or even a teacher pulling one or two students aside while others work on work to give that individual support.
Sure got my work laptop.
So there is some internal kind of things happening in a general education classroom. There is also, for the whole district, they have to, under the law, adopt a district curriculum accommodation plan, or DCAP plan. And these are kind of system-wide within the local school, ways that they should be meeting the needs of diverse learning styles. We know that everyone learns different. Not every educator has been educated in the UDL, or the Universal Design for Learning strategies. But I think that's coming. I think that as new educators come into the field, they'll have more tools to kind of model their classes and the learning so that it meets different kinds of styles. This district accommodation plan might state that all students have extra time to complete classwork or a test. Everyone adopts their own plan, and it really is trying to create more supports within the general education classroom. This is before we get to special education or even disability identification. So I think schools are trying to set up more structure within the classroom. That said, I think schools are really challenged right now. I'm hearing lots of things in Massachusetts where there's going to be staff cuts due to budget issues, and so class sizes might rise, and so classes might become a little bit more challenging. A mental health diagnosis is a change in the pathway. I think we want to make sure that it's essential that families and providers, anyone who's involved with a family and a student, start to really advocate for that student when they do get that diagnosis. I hope we're all in school and at home and in the community, making sure that we're looking for signs of trouble with kids. That if they're being withdrawn, they're not participating, they're just struggling. A student who is normally doing well in school is not doing well. I hope that educators, have that lens on and can kind of raise a flag, like something is happening. That's what happened with me as a parent. With my older son, the teacher pulled me aside and said, something's not right. I'm seeing something, I don't know what it is, but let's refer him for special education. I think for families that receive that a mental illness diagnosis, there's still a stigma in our communities around that. And I think that's difficult. It was difficult for me as a parent to be open about my second son's challenges in school. I just there is still a stigma. But sharing information helps communicate, um, keep that line of communication open between schools. And it also can help your educators kind of give you a context of what's happening and why. So it's not just typical behavior. It's related to a disability. And so any student who has received that medical diagnosis or is experiencing a mental illness can be referred for an evaluation for special education. Our state has a really nice online guide about the whole process about referral, evaluation, and eligibility. I'm going to go through some of that process today, but there is a nice link there and very kind of user friendly. So what is special education? Why would you be referred to special education? It's really to help meet the disability-related needs of a student. It provides that specialized instruction and/or related services to help that student access the general curriculum. So the eligibility process is a very formal process within schools, and we're just going to I have all these slides for you in case you're not aware of the process and give you that background. Um, there's a referral. The parent has to consent. There's a formal evaluation, and then there's a meeting to determine eligibility for special education. Um, the consent form is really designed to kind of identify, we want all areas of disability, suspected disability. And for students, uh, you know, with mental health issues, they might be fine in terms of academics until they have an incident or they just start to show signs of the illness and starting to withdraw, and then you'll see a shift in their academic performance. But we don't always know why. And so having an evaluation is a process that the schools follow. And so schools do not make that medical diagnosis of psychosis. That's comes in as additional information. I think what schools are looking at is like, how is this factored into the academic potential of the student and where we should be supporting them. And so to access special education, you need to go through a formal evaluation by the school. Parents have to, if they ask for a form, the school district has to give them within 5 school days of that referral. And then the family signs it. Once it's signed, all of these timelines start, and schools must evaluate the student within 30 days of receiving the signed consent. If the student is not in school, I think that's where we might have some play here in terms of understanding how that's going to work. If the student is unable to attend school, there might be some leeway here outside of the legal days so that the family and the school agree that the student would not be evaluated for special education until they were maybe back in the school setting. There is a new box on the consent form that we are asking families to check off, is that you formally request that you're going to get a summary of all the evaluation reports 2 days prior to the team meeting where the IEP, the eligibility will be determined. And that's to give families time to read these reports, to look at the recommendations that are made by the evaluator, and are prepared to come to the team meeting and discuss the students' needs. So after the evaluation, there is that report that's written. It's going to lay out all the procedures, the test results, and interpretation of the data. This is really difficult for families to access. Most of us don't, study how to read an evaluation report. All of the tests are very, highly technical. There's lots of numbers. Hopefully, there's some language that families can follow, but It is a first kind of glance, and often it's I think emotionally challenging for families to all of a sudden reconcile with the things that they might have been seeing for a while, and now it's been putting into words, and so that often families need support just to access the report, read it, and understand it. Um, the what this is all done within those 30 days after the consent is signed. A team meeting is scheduled for the determination of eligibility. It should be mutually convenient to the parents. And uh, this is where often the schools will propose something and the families feel like they have to attend on that day and time. And there is some opportunity for the families to say, well, that's just not convenient for us, or we'd like to reschedule. And so that conversation should happen so that the families are ready and prepared to come to that meeting. And hopefully they've used those couple of days prior to the meeting to review the evaluation forms. Most families get them that 2 days before. They're never ready early. So you'll get a formal invitation to this team meeting. It's all happens within 45 days. So like about 2 weeks after the evaluation is done, the school will schedule this meeting. Families have their legal right to participate. Students at age 14 in Massachusetts are legally invited to the meeting. And this is where especially a regular IEP meeting, the first time for eligibility. Is it important for the student to attend? That's, I think, a family decision. The student would have information maybe about their disability-related needs, but it's up to the family, I think, to decide is this appropriate for the student. They can invite others with knowledge about the child. Our recommendation at the Federation is that no single parent goes to this meeting alone, that at least bring a note taker, could be a friend, that emotional support person, and someone who's now supporting them in the meeting. There's also opportunity for virtual participation if that works for the family. I know for regular IEP meetings, many families are asking for that to be done virtually on Zoom because they don't have to give up a full day of work, and they can just, find a quiet place at work or go out to their car and participate in the meeting, which might be an hour long. So for the initial IEP eligibility meeting, it might be a little bit easier to participate in person and have those conversations. So the school district actually follows a formal form, and this is available. All of these forms are available on the Department of Education's website. They'll go through this form, and the form has to be kind of followed through to be able to be reach the bottom. Yes, you're eligible for special education. So number one is, does the student qualify with one of those disability types? And these are federally defined types. And so you'll check off the box, yes, and that would come from the evaluation. It could also come from the medical diagnosis that the family brings as information to that meeting. The next question is a two-part question. Question two is the student making effective progress in general education? And so that is like, are they being able to participate fully, access the curriculum that's laid out under Massachusetts learning standards? And we're going to look at a lot of evidence here, and that's could be test scores, it could be grades, it could be teacher observations. It could be family contributing data and information. If the student is struggling at home with all of the homework, this is all information that goes to determining, are they making effective progress? And it's not passing from year to year. It's really, are they, grasping the material and having the capacity to learn without special education. If we do see some challenges, if we do see the student behind, if we do see the student not doing well according to the typical potential of a student in that age range and that grade, is it a result of the student's disability? And so it has to be disability related, that the student is not making effective progress and it's disability related. And so then if the answer is yes, you kind of come to that third analysis. Would the student require special education or related services to make that progress? Do they need someone to modify or to provide those specialized instruction in an area of need? And it can be in all different kinds of, ways. It could be because we're looking at both the academic and functional performance of a student. It's not just academics, but also their behavioral, their function. Are they able to, follow directions, work in groups, participate in the classroom successfully? So it's really a holistic look at the student and that evaluation results. And usually they make some type of determination of disability and related needs, what the student might need. It could be speech and language, it could be physical therapy, could be some type of emotional support services within the school or therapeutic services. All of those come under that special education lens. And if you've answered, like, come through this and saying, yes, the student has a disability, they're not really making effective progress, it's definitely a result of the student's disability, and specialized instruction would be essential for the student to make that effective progress, then they're eligible for special education. If at any time we're seeing like no here, so the student still has a disability, but they may not be eligible for special education. And that's where that Section 504 comes in, your rights under federal law to get reasonable accommodations in a school setting. Have I lost you? So it says families can ask to include additional people in the meeting. Yes. And I think it really the law goes to people with knowledge about the child. So it could be a therapist, a provider. I've brought a coach, a sports coach, to one of my meetings to help the team understand my students' strengths versus all the deficits. Because often a lot of these conversations function around all the things that the challenges that the student has versus building on the strengths. But never have a family go in alone. I think that's hard for a family to synthesize all of the conversation because, and it's a very daunting space. Families walk into a room with like sometimes 10 experts about their child around the table. So I think having that emotional support is helpful. I also hope that families realize that they have the legal right to support if they're not English speaking native speakers, that they have the right to have all of the materials, including that evaluation report, translated in their native language, and also the right to an interpreter, including ASL, at these meetings, because we really want them to participate as fully as possible. And even if a family feels like, well, gee, my English is good enough, I recommend, especially in a eligibility determination meeting, that they use an interpreter, that they really have the information in their native language in order to be a participant in this meeting. Parents need to inform the school in advance of their needs for an interpreter, and so that they get a correct interpreter. And I think schools have been a little bit creative lately. Sometimes they bring an interpreter in via Zoom, but just making sure that that family has access to the information in their native language. and they can't really delay. Schools are getting good at this, and they need to have the materials translated. And often they hit Google Translate and hand a form, an evaluation report to a family, and it's unreadable. Some languages don't really work with Google Translate, so families should just feel confident enough to push back a little bit and say, "This isn't working for me." I know with Vietnamese, it's terrible. So the if the student is deemed eligible for special education, they're going to write an IEP, and that stands for Individualized Education Program. It's not a plan, it's a whole program. It's designed to meet the student's unique needs, and really to set reasonable goals for the student. So they're working on skills that will help them overcome their disability-related barriers. And it lays out in this legal document all of the services and the supports that the school would provide. So it is a legal document, it's enforceable, and it's important that families understand all of the sections of the IEP. These slides are more around the eligibility process. The Federation has lots of workshops that families can go to. We have a basic rights series that talks to the evaluation and eligibility process, understanding all of the different sections of the IEP, and then to help students who are age 14, they have the legal right to stay until 22 if they haven't accepted a diploma after 4 years, around post-secondary transition planning. So there's a lot in this one IEP to help the student when they're in school. These are some of those timelines. Someday I'm going to have this made into a placemat for dinner, so that we all learn it. You can see the referral is made. It could be made by an educator, a parent, somebody who knows the child, a medical provider. Parent consents. The school has 30 days to conduct those evaluations. In the next 2 weeks, there'll be that meeting to determine eligibility. At the end of that meeting, the school would develop an IEP and deliver it to the family. They'll also determine placement after the IEP is developed. The parent has 30 days to sign. Until that parent signs that form, no services happen. And so that's really important that the family, acts in a timely fashion to sign that. Because this whole process, look at this, it could be several months before a student is identified, before they actually start getting services in school. So here's what happens if the team decides a student's not eligible for special education. They have to notify them formally in writing within 10 days of that meeting. The student may not be eligible for special education, but still has a disability, that they can be eligible. I think the next slide's 504. If the family disagrees with the school's evaluation, they can always request an independent educational evaluation. I probably could do a whole workshop on all of the different ways that all happens, who pays for what, where that flows out, but they do have this right. If they do go that route and get that second opinion, we recommend that whoever they're working with to develop that second evaluation also agree to come back either by phone or by Zoom or in person to the IEP meeting and defend their report. It's really not appropriate for a family to start uh, advocating for someone else's report. Someone says, who does that request go to? If they want to request an independent evaluation, they can request it through the school. So the school, this is where it gets pretty complicated, and I don't really want to go into it. They'll request an independent evaluation from the school. If the school feels that their evaluation was fully they would deny it and say you always have the right to do it on your own dollar. But if the school is going to pay, this a lot of couple things come into place. It depends on if the family is of a certain income, that might be free. If the school says we deny it, there's a five, there's a, they have the right to go to the Board of Special Education Appeals to challenge this. It's definitely a more of a complicated legal thing with lots of different, depends on where the family is and how that works. Often a family's insurance will pay for an independent evaluation. That's how I did one of mine. And it really depends on if you can come in with a medical related type of request through your insurance company. So we counsel families around how to request it, whether they're going to go through the school or independently. If the school agrees to pay, one of the challenges is that they only pay the state rate for an independent education evaluation. And I think it's about $2,000 right now. And the only places where you can get an independent evaluation is through the hospitals. And there's a long waiting line. Sometimes it's over a year. Um, and so the system is not set up for students and families. And so the evaluation here is important, and it's sad that there's a long timeline because now you're maybe in a situation where it's a conflict and the student is not getting the appropriate services until that outside independent evaluation is done. The law also is specific about this, that the school districts only have to consider this. They do not have to follow the independent evaluation. I think in the case of a student with a medical diagnosis of psychosis, that could come in as an independent evaluation. I don't see how the school can deny that as a disability. It really, the issues and the questions might go to, whether this is a case where the student requires specialized instruction. And it really depends on how the disability is manifesting itself in the classroom. Is the student not doing the work? Is the student missing a lot of school? Is the student, refusing to, do things within the classroom? Then I would say that's disability related and will require specialized instruction. And the next slide is a little bit more around if you don't go on an IEP, you can go on a 504. So one of the things in this process for evaluation is if you're not satisfied with the evaluation, the school will talk about maybe we'll do more testing and an extended evaluation, or talk about the family's individual rights to an independent evaluation. But they also have to document their key findings. And so they should be telling you why the student did not qualify. And this is really important. Someone's asking, can you agree to certain sections of the IEP and not other sections? Once a student is on an IEP, there's a 3-year kind of legal right to having special education. And the school district, after 3 years, has the right to reevaluate. Like, did the specialized supports and services work for this student? And after 3 years, they no longer require special education. So they'll do another evaluation in 3 years. For that annual IEP meeting, you should be adjusting things, changing things, setting new goals, etc. If at any point at that annual meeting that you disagree with, like, gee, they're taking away speech and language, or they're taking away this therapeutic service, you can disagree with that. You always have the right to disagree. Everything else stays in place. They're called stay put rights. And so you can, at the end of the IEP meeting, you get the form. You don't like the goal area, you don't like denial of services in one area or not, you sign it, but you can reject certain sections. So there's nuances of how to disagree with the district's findings. And then hopefully you'll meet again, bring new information to the table, and come to agreement on those areas of disagreement. So I hope that answers your question. So for students who are, yes, check the box, they have a disability, they've come in with a diagnosis of psychosis, the school says, yes, We see that, but we don't see the need for specialized instruction. Students have the right to be on a 504 plan, to get reasonable accommodations within the school setting. It's not special education. So required for these plans, it's really interesting. The Section 504 was adopted in 1973, so the law hasn't really been changed, and it actually doesn't require a written plan, although most school districts in Massachusetts, I haven't seen one yet, that doesn't have a written plan. It doesn't require parents to be at the meetings to write these plans. So these are some of these interesting nuances with the old law that the current practice in Massachusetts, I think, is a little more family friendly. Um, so there's a disability determination based on those evaluations. The accommodations are based on need. It could also be in testing, and you have some rights under both 504 and IEP. 504 plans do not have progress reports because the student's not working on any skills. There's no kind of specialized instruction to help that student gain skills. They're just getting access. It's like how they're supported in the schools. There's no requirement for an annual meeting, but most schools do. And there's no right to transition planning, post-secondary transition planning, which I think is difficult. So they're definitely different. You get reasonable accommodations. You can have accommodations on an IEP. The 504 plan is just much more limited in its scope for the student to receive that specialized instruction. You can, in Massachusetts, get a related service under a 504 plan. Um, Um, okay, so someone's asking a specific question. I'm going to deal with that at the end because it's if the parent agrees and signs a consent for special education to be evaluated for special education, the school district cannot delay that. They cannot start putting roadblocks in and changing things. And that would be an interesting one to. We always get fun questions. I'm going to deal with that one at the end, and hopefully we can have a conversation about that. Where am I at? Okay, once again, an IEP, it's accepted. The parent signs it, they implement it. You're going to get uh, progress reports on the student's goals on that IEP as often as the student gets report cards. So we should be tracking progress. I think the hardest thing for families is to be in alignment with the school to when you set a goal, and it's a goal for reading, and the student is maybe 2 years behind on reading skills, and they're going to develop goals around reading. It should be measurable. You should know how much growth the student is going to gain in that 1 year. You set the goal with the baseline of where the student is now, and you set for that 1 year goal on an IEP. What's that reasonable, attainable, challenging goal for that student to close that gap, to get them caught up? And there should be benchmarks so that you can measure it along the way. You should know through the testing that the school is doing, the data that they're collecting, how much progress that student is gaining. You should not have to wait for a whole year to find out the student did not make progress on that goal, was not making effective progress, that the supports and services in the IEP were not adequate for that student. And so that's why progress reports are so important and understanding those measurable goals. Every year, the team will meet, review the IEP. You should not get the same goals because that goal is, hopefully they've grown and gained some skills. It could be in the same area, that the student is still working to improving, but students change within a year a lot. And so we're going to set new goals and, or new targets or expand the student's skills in those areas. And every 3 years, the school has the right to reevaluate the student. And families, I don't think realize that because that's a reevaluation, almost a redetermination of eligibility for special education. So it is an important time period. for the student because the district could say you're no longer eligible. I tried to come up with some accommodations that I thought might be appropriate or could be part of the discussion for a student who's diagnosed with psychosis. Um, there is some opportunities for students with mental health issues to get school-based counseling. I really think it should be a good fit. I know with my son, it wasn't. And so, how do you then balance what the student might be receiving privately with what's happening in the school? And that's where, keeping conversation and communication open so that the student is fully supported. There might be some medication accommodations, support depending on the age of the student. And I really think most medications, and this is where I'm going to say I don't know because I'm an attorney and I don't want to tell you things I don't know. But I think you're not allowed to have medication in school, that everything has to be in the nurse's office. So the student might have to have accommodations to visit their nurse's office to have their medication. I think this is an easy one for schools, alternative environments, find a quiet space for that student to finish their work or to take that test or to work on a project. Making you don't have to spend any money on that, folks. It's just providing the alternative spaces that work for that student. Um, Specialized instruction is when a special educator is looking at the student of where they're at right now and saying, how do I make this content or make sure the assignments work with the student in terms of their capacity to learn? And if a student is really struggling with a mental illness, that maybe we'll change some of the assignments. How do you provide the same access to the curriculum but lay off on the homework or some of the assignments or structure it so that it meets the student's learning style? That's that flexibility that we should be providing for students. Preferential seating, maybe the student needs to be in the front of the class or in the back of the class. This is where I think students are so important in the conversation around setting accommodations, whether on a 504 plan or an IEP. What does the student think they need? What do the professionals think the student needs? And how do we come together? Because the student themselves has to agree to some of this stuff. They've got to have some buy-in or it's really not going to work. Attendance policies. So there's a legal requirement for the kids to be in school, but man, school avoidance is something we all live with. And so working with your school. At one point, my son stayed until 11 o'clock in the morning and then was, quote, a full day. And then we brought him home because lunchtime was really a challenging period for my son. And then we did stuff in the afternoon. So he got his academics in the morning, clocked in for that day, and he had a shorter school day. Before I homeschooled them. But, talking to the school about those attendance policies and where there's some flexibility, because once they miss so many days, they're really not on track to move forward. Extra time, flexible deadlines. Some teachers are more nice about this than others. Um, just figuring it out. If a student's in a really challenging honors class and this is the expectation of everyone, it's tough sometimes. And that's where having those teams within the school talk among themselves as to how they're going to support a student best to really the key is to keep the kid in school, keep the kid learning. That's, the best success for, especially after an illness, to get this kid back in regular routine and keeping up with their class. And that could be sometimes even note-taking assistance or assistance in an organization or keeping on task. What kind of tracker system are they using? Are they understanding how to access the supports the educators might be giving? It really should be individualized to the student. And there's lots out there. The student has to really agree to take advantage of it too. And I think that's a hard thing sometimes with some students who might be not wanting to ask for extra time. And so I think that's that relationship and hoping that the educators offer that assistance, not as a a crutch or an aid, but as a disability related right to navigate the school. Safety plans. I think for some people who are at risk for either suicidal thinking, other dangerous behaviors, having that safety plan, it can operate outside of an IEP. It can be integrated into the IEP. And you guys are probably a little bit more experienced in this area than I am. I think developing it in partnership with the schools when the issues are going to come up, what are we going to do? Helping the staff that are working with the student have a little bit more knowledge about their disability, about their illness. And so maybe helping them to identify areas where the student might be triggered or seeing signs of escalation or different kinds of behaviors, to allow that student to like have that break, to make sure they check in with the student, they check in with whoever is monitoring the student in that school environment, because that plan should really be in place to support the student. Having contact information or phone numbers for anybody who's working with the student to get some more support or connections. There's the right to privacy around health issues, but this is where families have to kind of decide, is this going to be helpful? Did they want the school to contact them first, and then they would contact any mental health provider that the family's working with? My older son, took advantage when he was in school that they brought in the medical, what do they call them? The team that comes in, they call in a team to support a student in a mental health crisis. So they called that team in first. They were there right away. They called me. We worked together. It's really important that the student is supported during any kind of a crisis within the school, and we get the appropriate help. And however that's going to work, figure it out, write up a plan, and make sure that people are aware of it. I think the other thing that we have to work hard on is if a student has been hospitalized or out of school for a while, how do we bring them back? How do we create that safe reentry plan? It's going to look different for every student. And maybe it's going back part-time. Maybe it's participating in some things and not in others. I just think it's a really good idea that we all start thinking of having those conversations, having that structure, and pushing back at the school if the school says, well, no, these are our rules. Realizing that the school, this student is a student with a disability, and how are we going to make that work? The student might have to do some of that work to catch up on their own. Like, how are we going to do that so it's not a burden? And then getting that buy-in from the student, because they might have to like work a little bit harder. My son used to make up a lot of work in the summer and stuff. If they didn't have an IEP before being hospitalized, these are those conversations. I let's look at the light most positive. Schools are there to help students learn. So now you have a crisis. We're going to have to deal with it.
Found
We're going to
out
figure
all
out
the information.
a plan. I'm sorry. Did you want to ask a question if that was yours? I don't know. But that's where you can start the process for the IEP. You can bring information to the school so that they start to recognize the student has a disability, and maybe we go on a 504 plan. You can start that process, but you're still going to have to work probably with the principal and maybe guidance and others to help that student have these kinds of plans. These kinds of plans can be in place outside of an IEP. I think it's best practice for schools to support students so that they're safe. And then they have legal rights also to maybe reasonable accommodations or specialized instruction. And that's where families have to disclose. That's where students have to disclose so that they get those appropriate supports and services. Someone's asking BRYT programs. You're going to have to kind of spell out that acronym for me because I don't know it. New on me. So help me here. And I just talked a little bit, but parents can disagree with the school. You have lots of safeguards under the law. You have the right to that prior notice of what they're supposed to be doing. You can review the students' records. You have the right to participate in meetings. There's a whole dispute kind of thing. We have lots of rights here to go to mediation, to have a facilitated IEP. That's where organizations like mine can help families figure out how they want to navigate. It's faster and cheaper to work it out with the school district. You can always hire an attorney and go forward. It's just an area of conflict. It's difficult. It's difficult for families. Bridge for Resilient Youth and Transition Programs. Oh, okay. So here's um that's why I do these things, folks. You guys teach me stuff. Okay.
And I don't
Um,
want to interrupt you.
no.
I actually work with Bright. I'm their director of district and school support. So I'm always happy to talk with folks. So not all schools have Bright, but it's increasingly becoming more common across schools in Massachusetts. And
Oh, wow.
it's a tier three general education support for students who have had a disruption due to a significant mental health challenge.
Oh, cool. So it's in that tiered system of support, tier three.
Yeah.
Wow. See? Oh, thank you. I'm learning stuff. I also am really a big fan of the Massachusetts Mental Health Consortium. And a lot of schools are buying into that community of practice around providing the appropriate behavioral support for younger students so that it doesn't escalate into kind of challenging behaviors and meeting students where they're at. Another great group. Going out. This is a little bit about how you can connect to the Federation. We do have this information center. We have staff that speak language, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Vietnamese, Russian. We also have a language line. So if families speak another line, connect to us. You can always call. Anyone can call. I learn things all the time. All of our workshops on our we just changed a new website. So it's the Federation without the PTI workshops. But you go to our website, all of the workshops there, anyone can sign up for them. And they're all now virtual. We have usually a workshop every single evening. We do our basic rights workshops every single week, except for next week because it's school vacation week. And we also are doing them in like a series in Spanish, a series in Portuguese, so that those are available there. And this is just the general information to connect to the Federation. We have an online intake form. And I didn't realize we also are doing a virtual annual conference on March 7th. It's called the Visions of Community Conference. It's only $25 to attend on a Saturday. If you don't want to work on a Saturday, register anyway, and you get access to all of the recordings, the workshops for 3 months after through this Zoom event platform. So that's that. I'm going to stop sharing and play with all of these things. Um, so happy to answer any questions, but we can also go through the chat here. We talked about, yes, families can bring additional people to the meeting. The request for an independent evaluation goes to the school district. Then the school district will decide whether they're going to fund it or whether they're going to challenge it. Families can always do an independent evaluation on their own. The school district will just consider it. Challenges like that can also go to our state problem resolution service. They can go to substantive kind of issues that the student is not being qualified for special education. So they can look at the current factual evaluation materials and make a determination. So there's lots of routes for resolving conflict with schools. I talked a little bit about, yes, they can agree to certain sections of the IEP and not. And I think that's where some of the challenges are as students shift from one school structure to another, say from elementary to middle school. Things look different in the middle school. So the types of programming that you might have gotten in an elementary school are going to look different in that environment, are going to look different in the high school environment. And so sometimes it's just understanding that and how it's going to work. Also, students, they change and grow. So just speaking as a parent, services that they agreed to maybe in middle school, they're just gonna like, hey, I'm not gonna do that, mom, in high school. Like, don't even put it in my IEP. I'm not gonna do it. My older son said, I'm moving to text to speech software. I'm not gonna do another fluency drill in my life. That's it. I'm done. So you can have the best plan as a parent and a school and educators, and the students doesn't have that buy-in. So we really are starting to, especially with the new IEP form in Massachusetts, starting to think of how do we involve students earlier on in the educational planning and supports. So beginning at age 3, a student can be identified for special education, and they can participate and talk about their concerns or their vision for their future at age 3. And the schools are saying, we're having fun talking to kids. And now the student realizes there's a team of people who are helping them navigate and deal with some of their challenges. As students get older, like let's hear their voice, especially for an older student in high school who might maybe have to go another year because they missed like so much school. And that might be a challenge for a student who might be hospitalized for several months and might have to figure out how to make up work to come back into school. Do they come back into their grade? Just saying that you can be a little creative around this type of thing. For my younger son, who was homeschooled for a while, who accessed community college, the school accepted the community college classes as academic classes to meeting local requirements for graduation. Often they might say you can do an independent project as long as you meet certain qualifications. They Summer school might be a better place for a student to be because the classes are smaller. They're not competing in that really intense kind of climate that sometimes is in a school. So really be open to looking and thinking outside the box when we're working with these students because um, it's really a fast track, I think, once they start getting into high school. And uh, it's hard for students. Um, I love this Bridge for BRYT programs. I'm going to learn more about that. Um, and knowing which schools have it or not, I think that would be the other thing. Doesn't mean you can't take the best practices from that and bring it into your school also, that kind of thing. So the parent consultant training, we have a higher level of training at the Federation. It's the PCTI. It both has parents and educators participating. We have a virtual session. We also have an asynchronous session. I don't know where we're at right now. I think we're right now doing a virtual class, which meets weekly. But I think it's 8 weeks of time. It's several $100s to participate. We do have some scholarship. Um, we used to do an in-person week-long session in June. I can't remember if we did it last year. Sorry, I don't run that program, but it is a really kind of more of a deep dive into it, and we bring in speakers, say from some of the state agencies to talk about how they might work with students and support the process of special education, because there's really not enough money, folks, is challenging. For some students, I'm hoping that they get the supports they need, they can stay in the local school, that they don't require an out-of-district placement, which is taking them out of their local school. Maybe it's the least restrictive environment and the best environment, but it's taking them away from, their community, their friends, the local programming, and they have to ride a bus usually. And so it's taxing for the kids. Even a student though who's homeschooled, that a family decides to homeschool for whatever time period, the student has the legal right to access the full community of the school. So my son was able to like participate on the baseball team, and then be a manager for the baseball team while he was homeschooled. And they can go to the dances and other things, but it's just to try to keep them still involved with their friends and their interests, playing to their strengths and their interests, to keep them motivated to get through some of the crisis, and some of the challenges. So I think that's that understanding. But you do have to ask, folks. The school's not going to offer stuff. They just don't. They're busy. They're challenged with staffing. And so the more you know, the better it is. I also counsel families to find your people. And so every school district in Massachusetts is required to have a special education parent advisory council. This is a group of volunteer parents who look at how things are going and advise the school what's working and what's not working. I think that's a valuable group, especially if you kind of want to be in the back end, kind of pushing. There can be your spokespeople out front. Finding community support places. I'm a graduate of NAMI, the family class. That was really helpful to me to understand my kids' disability and their challenges and put it in the right context. I love ppal.net, Parent Professional Advocacy League, supporting families of kids with mental illness. They have an annual conference. I know it because it's on my calendar. I'll look it up. In Oh, I thought it was on my calendar. Maybe not. It's in like April or May. No, here it is. May 15th, PPAL has a conference. But they also have family support groups and student support groups. And I think that's really helpful if students can connect with other students who face similar challenges, or just the fact that they're on an IEP or 504, to reduce the stigma, to kind of get a little bit of personal acceptance. Find your people, um, whoever they are. And there's a lot of support out there. There's a lot of online places that people are asking good questions and finding things. Not so much in the mental health field, though. Matrix Parents. Oh, I don't know that one either. Can someone tell me a little bit more about Matrix?
Yeah, sure. So there are advocates who go and do presentations similar to this. Um, they're primarily out of Marin here in Northern California.
Oh.
So I'm not sure how many of us are on the call, but definitely worth looking at. They do regular IEP trainings, 504s, just telling you about parent rights and how to be strong advocates.
Great, thanks. I learned something new.
Mhm.
I presented once in Alaska, and I'm like, so what do you guys do out here? And they're like, it's all virtual. It just
I'm
depends on where
wondering
you're
it too,
living.
and Jacqueline, thank you for putting that in the chat. If we can go back to your question from earlier about parents' rights when someone's agreed to an IEP, but then they're kind of pushing it off, and the person is deficient in credit, so they're offering continuation school instead of the evaluation.
And I think that's illegal because you've signed you're a registered student. The kids, being challenged. They You sign a consent to evaluate. That starts the legal process, and they can't kind of delay that. And especially to me, if the student is deficient in credits, something is not happening for that student. They're not making effective progress in education. So we need to find out why. And so that's a call to the Federation or to Mass Advocates for Children Here in Massachusetts or the Disability Law Center to kind of tease out. That's where I'd really like to look at the specific language that they used. Anytime a school district says something to a parent that they don't know about or don't understand, what we counsel them to do is saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know about that policy. Can you send it to me? Can I see that in writing?"
Mhm.
Anytime the school says, "This is the way we do things, this is our policy," ask for it. Ask for
Mhm.
it in writing, because sometimes they don't have it.
Hmm. Yeah. No, this is helpful because I've been having a lot of very unique cases where schools are refusing to implement 504s, even though the client has a disability, saying, their protocol is to do an SST before. And so just a lot of things, even I've had someone say, just because your treatment team's requesting an IEP assessment doesn't mean we're going to do it.
Well, you as a parent can request. So that's,
Hmm.
yeah, like, okay,
Yep.
you're not going to, and that's where we've seen that somewhere where a physician is kind of asking for an assessment. And it's like, okay, just empower the family to walk in and sign the form.
Yes.
Because then that
Mhm.
starts the process. The uh, the challenge is you have legal rights. We should be enforcing them through our state system. So you can always file a state complaint with the PRS here in Massachusetts. Every state has a place. We also used to have our Office of Civil Rights under federal law, OCR. It's still there. You can still file a claim, but there's nobody on the other end to read it. Our federal government has eviscerated the Office of Civil Rights. And so that it's really challenging, folks. We've lost a whole arm of enforcement in our country. I'll be really honest. When I heard that the first cuts were in OCR, I cried because I found them to be a really great support of both professionals and families in us understanding the nuances, the law, and they listened and they acted. And they're gone right now. But we're going to make it through, folks. We are. We're going to make it through. Um,
Martha, I
and
saw you had raised your hand. Was that, did you want to add something or?
No, it was an
Okay.
accident. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Um, so, I think it's really hard when a student is, as Martha has her hand raised, when a student oh, you're just hitting all fun buttons. Um, when a student is challenged and really has to leave school and has to deal with the medical health crisis and then negotiating with the school how to get back. And so I think having a conversation with the leader of the school, hopefully they're sensitive and want to put the supports in place as soon as possible. And that's where I referenced the district curriculum accommodation plan that people don't know about. That they might have already the legal rights to extra time. And we'll do the details later. Look at how can you accommodate this student right now, knowing that the best way to recovery is being back in that supportive structure and environment and being around friends. Having a safe person in school that your kid can know they can go and talk to. My kid, would get kicked out of class. So, having that place where they could go and, talk it through, deal with the issues at hand that day, and then having somebody kind of be with them to navigate back with that educator to cover the missed work that class, to repair the relationship, to find an accommodation that might work so that they could remain on good standing. This is public education. It should be supportive of the public. I'm in a mood on Friday. Sorry, folks. It's hard. It's hard when you get a lot of challenging questions during the week of like sometimes the school district, putting up barriers when, and even if they're appropriate legal barriers, like really? So you want us to go through this process, right? Okay. That's what we tell families is go through the process. Just hang in there. And I find that often just speaking to your child's team or educator can help a little bit while you're going through the process.
Well, and also great to have so many folks on this call here, coming more from the clinical side, but really trying to understand what those rights are and help people in navigating that. Because like you're saying, it's not necessarily, I really appreciate your point of you like have a law degree, are fluent in English, like are very, involved, and it's still a difficult thing. So yeah, appreciate the support that people here can provide.
And there's two learning curves. The learning curve is you're learning about your child's diagnosis and what that all means and how it looks on your kid, and then how does it fit in the system. So it's hard in the beginning. A lot of families just sign forms because they're beaten up and they're tired, and they want something for their kid, and then realize it isn't really working. And so, there are people that can help along the way. And I hope families feel like number one, they're not alone. And number two, don't beat yourself up for things you didn't do last year or this year or last month. It's moving forward. Our expression at the Federation is, how can we help you today? Like, let's move forward. Let's take that next step. Try something. Come back to us if something didn't work, and we'll kind of figure that out. And that's why I'm thinking like you need to find your people, because sometimes you have to talk this through. Sometimes families have to kind of vent some of their frustration with just even the timelines and the systems. And I can't imagine waiting a year for an independent evaluation for the state rate that the school district will support that. And so the trick is the family, once they sign up for whatever hospital or whatever for that appointment, next October, they say, well, put me on the wait list and I will take, if you get a cancellation, we will come in. And so you might have to drop everything, take that day off from work, grab your kid out of school, run in. But if you put yourself on the wait list, you might get a cancellation. That's the free tip today. So what are some of the challenges that you guys are seeing as you help families? That's where I'm curious as to where are some of the roadblocks you're seeing?
One thing, this is Jacqueline, and I work for an early prevention and intervention program here in Northern California. Another recent incident that I had was a client's had about 4 hospitalizations, is having a lot of mental health challenges outside of school, is able to manage and cope while at school, but is still, the grades are plummeting. Had an assessment done. There was a discrepancy in the parents reporting, the clients reporting, and the teachers reporting, and they found this person to be ineligible under all categories. And so then we went to the school to try to describe, the recent events that have happened that has changed the dynamics. And they agreed in the meeting that they were going to reassess, but then later that day, mom got a denial saying they weren't going to proceed and that they didn't conclude evidence that determined her to be eligible for an IEP, but that they'd resort to a 504. Yes, the client's receiving a lot of like therapeutic interventions in school, but I strongly believe that they can benefit from a resource class, but got a lot of pushback. So those are kind of trends that I've been
Yeah.
seeing more recent.
So every state has a little bit different law. You all have to meet the floor of the federal law, but you can some states give more rights. For example, in Massachusetts, federal law says students are eligible for post-secondary transition planning at age 16. In Massachusetts, it's 14. We give them more rights. So every state's a little different. I'm glad that we've checked the box on disability. I'm glad we checked the box on 504 accommodations. You can also get those related services. I think the family just needs to track that student's progress, and demonstrate, what's the capacity of the student and where are they actually functioning, and that gap. And you have the right once a year to kind of have the student reevaluated. A lot of these tests can't be done with fidelity, too close together, but you can have another assessment for special education and with new evidence. So that's where it's difficult, that they do not see the academic, say, challenge, but it should also look at the functional performance of the student. And some of these kids are, just not handling the stress well. Lack of support systems within schools. Every school's kind of set up a little bit differently in terms of their supports. And I think they're getting better around supporting kids with mental health issues. Just wait till you get to college, though. Oh my gosh. It's a whole nother ball game. The that's you only get 504 rights in college, the right to reasonable accommodations. And they're all individualized and they're all challenging for kids. Yes. Clinic in Indiana. Lack of understanding from schools about psychosis. Yes. I think that's the other piece, is they get the autism and the, intellectual disability and the dyslexia, but it's really hard to understand. And so that might mean that you might need to bring somebody to your IEP meeting who can explain the student's, mental health condition and how it impacts them. Very quickly, though, I was able to Google psychosis and realize that it can lead to a lot of lack of kind of clear thinking on the part of a student, and confusion, and not having those executive functioning skills. That's all embedded in that, diagnosis. So bringing that information to the table, I think, be really great. They don't want to talk. Uh, um, about certain things. So the more information you can bring to the school district, the better. I remember years and years ago when autism was first coming. My older son's 33. So when he was in school, I remember a parent hiring somebody to come to the school to talk about autism, because the educators didn't really have a good background in it and how it presented, how to support a student with autism, understanding that there was a spectrum in autism, and how, kids fell different places within that spectrum. So that parent said, that was the best kind of money they could spend that year, was to educate the school. She had the resources to do that, and I think it helped a lot of kids. But I think this is our area of learning and growth. And that's why John Crocker, who's out of Methuen, who's doing the Massachusetts Mental Health Consortium, the school districts, find out if it's the school district you're working with is part of that, and who the contact person is, because that might be your friendly person that you invite to the IEP meeting, because they have a little bit higher understanding of mental health and mental health issues. There's a lot of support that our State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is providing to this consortium, and they're doing really good work. And so that's kind of finding out who your friends are, even within the school district, to support a student in the process. It could even go to, maybe changing a guidance counselor. Some of them are more skilled in one area than another. And if it's not working out, that's, conversation. It doesn't cost any money for the school to just switch a guidance counselor from one who's a little bit more friendly, to one who's just putting up some more roadblocks around accessing services.
Well, and I imagine, especially for psychosis, the stigma plays a role in how people understand and are even like open to, learning more about what a person's individual needs are. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we do have um, that in our society, and it's in our schools also. And I get it. My mom was an elementary school teacher with her master's in special education. So, it is challenging to do everything that they have to do to take all the professional development. But that's where I'm always working with my parent groups to say, how can you talk to the school about, okay, what's your professional development schedule for next year? Maybe it should be a little bit around. We know our kids coming out of COVID had really high challenges around mental health, and that we didn't respond very well in our schools at all. And so we need more professional development. They need more tools in their toolkit to be able to respond appropriately to lots of different kinds of kids in their classrooms. And a lot of this stuff is silent. These kids, are dealing with a silent type of disability, or an invisible disability, until it doesn't work anymore. And when it doesn't work anymore, it doesn't work anymore. Whatever. Okay, keep advocating. Yes, I really appreciate you guys, because you are that backbone of a family, supporting that family, making sure that steering them to places where they can learn and understand their rights. And I think the best thing I do on any given day is listen to a family. I may not have all the answers, but just listening and validating their concerns, and helping them take that next step forward. We have a really neat program at the Federation. It's called Parent to Parent. And so you can get teamed up with another parent whose child has a similar diagnosis as yours. And so it's a one-to-one kind of support. So we train our parent support people. Then they go on a list, and somebody calls and says, I need a parent support, but I'm not a group person. I don't really want to go to meetings. And they can just connect one-on-one with another parent. They can do it virtually, by phone, or in person. And so that's just another opportunity for an individual family to get support. And we find, there's a lot of kids with like really funky diagnosis that they're not going to be representative in their own school district. They can't find their people locally, but maybe they can in another state, or in another country even. We've had some incredible connections. Wow. And this dual diagnosis, or the concept of all of a sudden schools learning more about the kid as the kid gets older. So that's why I think that 3-year reevaluation is good, because they go through a formal reeval. We start to look at things, but families should know that at any time they have a concern in another area, that they can have that student evaluated at that time for that other thing. So you start off with, speech and language, and then you realize that, maybe there's something else going on here. I think they have the legal right, it's called child find, to find kids and to do the testing and diagnose if there is a disability in any suspected area. And I can't tell you how many people with intellectual or developmental disabilities are now being diagnosed with mental health conditions. I think the nice thing is we're seeing it on the state agency post 22 level that those agencies are starting to talk to one another now to provide that wraparound kind of services and support. But it's hard sometimes. You get so stuck in one little bucket of diagnosis that you don't look outside and see other things. Oh yeah, all the high functioning kids. Yep. And my younger son was very gifted academically, but had the mental health diagnosis. And so that meant that he could get A's, no problem. He just couldn't stay in school. He just couldn't deal with the bureaucracy of school. And when he was in a crisis, it just did not work. The other piece of this is, and I didn't bring it up today, but we have a whole workshop on bullying at the Federation. And the fact that kids with disabilities are disproportionately affected by bullying, and that we need to have that as a consideration, especially when kids are reentering after hospitalization. Kids can be mean. There is now in Massachusetts on the IEP form a section on bullying. If it wasn't appropriate at the time the parents signed the IEP, anytime there's an incident, they can reconvene the team. They can discuss that and determine what are the skills that we need to teach the student to avoid or handle bullying. It then becomes legally enforceable. Every school district has a bullying plan that's on their website. That's how they react to it. The IEP and bullying can be done in a proactive way, empowering the student to maybe even report, to seek their safe person, whatever it is to keep them safe in school. That's my goal, is a student should feel safe in school. And we've got, as adults, have got to make sure that that happens. You guys are asking tough questions. They're long, so I have to read them. Is it legally appropriate for independent school to state that a child has needs they cannot support? So it depends on the independent school. If you are not in the public school system and just going to a private school, they don't have to follow federal law unless they're receiving federal funds. The student may have some rights to special education through their school district of residence, through equitable services. There's a legal term. It's out of my head. It's Friday. Sorry, guys. But there is a proportionate share of dollars that the school district has to spend on students who are maybe not in the public schools. And they have to evaluate. They have the legal right to evaluate, write an IEP. And then there is a portion of dollars. And so the student may not get everything that they need, but they have the right to equitable service dollars through the public school system here in Massachusetts. Oh my gosh. So the private school is a little different because you're not in a federally funded public institution, so you have less rights in a sense. Doesn't mean that that school shouldn't be supportive of a student. So that's that balance of like being in the right place at the right time. Complex overlap with children who struggle with substance abuse due to their environment, their home environment. Oh my gosh, how do you help these kids? See, these are the tough questions I don't sleep at night with, folks. That's the tease out of where's the appropriate public services to support that whole family without filing a 51A or without ratting on the family for not supporting their student. Is trying to find those hopefully appropriate services to support the family. And that could be in a couple different places. There's in Massachusetts, we have family resource centers throughout the state. Wonderful, wonderful places. Family can get more support, and that helps the whole family. Sometimes it's, food. The single most indicator of a kid's success in school is that they're not hungry. think about that. Like, let's make food available to kids. And so a lot of schools are. There's breakfast, there's lunch. You don't have to qualify. It's just there. That's where we as a system should be supporting kids and families. I saw incredible efforts by schools during COVID to provide that food. They had, car lines where bags of food and families just drove up and took food home. Um, schools can be wonderful, wonderful support places. But we just have to all work together. I don't have all the answers, folks, but I'm willing to support you in your journey, to steer you to or your families to the correct resources, ask our state the right questions. And if a school district's not doing right, we have conversations with our state DESE every week. And so I will kind of name names and say, hey, I'm hearing some bad things from this school district, and I want you to be aware. We encourage families to make that complaint, but not every family can make a complaint. So we act as that kind of notice. We put them on notice because I think schools should be doing the right thing. Just saying.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And some really fantastic questions in the chat too. I know we're right at 1 o'clock, but and there were some fantastic links in the slides, so we will post those on the website. I really appreciate you, Leslie, and generally the Federation for being available for people, as a resource too. So thank you all so much for coming today. This was really, really fantastic.
And feel free to reach out to me individually, okay? That's fine. Email's really good. Because I am a person with a disability bilateral hearing loss, and I don't do phones really well. So thanks for writing in the chat, folks. And have a great long weekend. Take care of yourself. Happy Valentine's Day, all that stuff.
Okay.
I really appreciate the work that you do and
Okay,
this
thanks.
opportunity to connect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, happy Friday. Thanks.